My name is David Parker, and I never thought I'd write the story of how my own brother tried to steal from me. Growing up, we shared everything: our childhood, our parents, their trust. When Mom and Dad passed, I assumed he would honor that bond. I was wrong. At first it was small things: questions about accounts, casual remarks about helping manage the estate. I brushed them off. I trusted him. I always trusted him. But deep down, something felt off, like a shadow lingering where light should be. One afternoon I was going through some old paperwork in the attic, the kind of documents you never touch unless you have to, and I found a folder labeled with his handwriting. I opened it, expecting maybe old tax forms or letters. Instead, I saw numbers that didn't add up. Properties sold, funds moved, accounts emptied, all in his hand. I froze. The betrayal was so blatant, yet so calculated, I could barely breathe. My brother had been selling our parents' assets behind my back, one transaction at a time. Everything we had trusted him with was disappearing while I was completely in the dark. I knew I had to act carefully. This wasn't just about money, it was about honor, justice, and proving that betrayal has consequences. And I also knew this wasn't a fight I could handle alone. I needed evidence, a plan, and the patience to let him reveal himself fully. Before I tell you exactly how I turned the tables on him, I need you to pay attention. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, you'll understand every step I took. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next isn't just shocking. It's the kind of revenge that makes your jaw drop. This is my story of discovering the ledger, confronting the truth, and planning the reckoning that would change everything. And believe me, you're going to want to see how it all unfolds. It started with little inconsistencies, things you might overlook if you weren't paying attention. I noticed that some property documents didn't match what I remembered. There were odd signatures, dates that didn't make sense, and transfers I hadn't authorized. My brother, Mark Parker, always had a calm, confident way of brushing off questions. "Don't worry, I'm handling it," he'd say with a smile that used to feel reassuring. Now it felt like a mask. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe I had misread the documents, maybe the bank made mistakes, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Every time I thought about our parents' legacy, their home, their investments, the memories tied to every room, I felt a cold pit in my stomach. Something was very wrong. One evening, I decided to go through our parents' safe, the one I hadn't opened since their passing. I knew it held insurance papers, titles, and old legal documents. As I opened it, a small envelope fell out, unmarked, but heavy with meaning. Inside were bank statements and property deeds I hadn't seen before, and every single one bore my brother's handwriting. It hit me like a punch. He had been systematically liquidating the estate, selling the houses, emptying the accounts, transferring assets to accounts I'd never been told about. Each page of the ledger told a story of betrayal I could barely comprehend. I confronted him casually at first, trying to gauge his reaction. "Mark, can you explain these transfers?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. He chuckled, that same nervous charm I'd always known. "David, relax. It's all for your benefit, you'll see." But I wasn't relaxed. I wasn't naive. I saw the flicker in his eyes, the split second where guilt tried to appear, but arrogance quickly replaced it. That moment told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't going to admit it. He thought he was untouchable. I knew I had to gather proof, not just for myself, but to expose him fully. I photographed every page, logged every transaction, and started compiling a record that even the most cunning lawyer couldn't ignore. But this wasn't about legal maneuvering alone. It was about reclaiming what was stolen and teaching him a lesson he'd never forget. As I locked the ledger back into the safe, I realized something crucial. Patience would be my greatest weapon. I had to wait for the right moment to strike, to let him make a mistake, and then I'd be ready. If you've ever had someone you trusted betray you completely, you know that simmering mix of anger and disbelief. And that's exactly where I was, hurt, enraged, but already planning how the scales would tip in my favor. The next part will take you inside the ledger itself, every hidden sale, every falsified document, and the shocking details of just how much was at stake. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a blueprint for justice. Stay tuned, because the truth is about to come crashing down. I spent that night hunched over the ledger, flipping through page after page, each one a fresh betrayal. It was meticulous, calculated, and almost cruel in its precision. Mark Parker had been selling the family properties, moving money into offshore accounts, and even falsifying signatures to cover his tracks. Every transaction was documented in neat handwriting, like he was proud of it. My hands shook as I realized the full scope. The estate wasn't just diminished, it was nearly wiped out. What hurt even more was the thought of him smiling while I believed he was honoring our parents' legacy. He had turned trust into a weapon, and I was the unsuspecting victim. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. I needed to understand the legal ramifications of every move Mark had made. As I explained what I had found, my lawyer's tone shifted from polite concern to outright shock. "David, this isn't just theft. It's fraud, forgery, and possibly tax evasion. If we act carefully, you can reclaim everything." That gave me a spark of hope, but it was tempered by the anger boiling inside me. I couldn't just rely on lawyers. I needed to confront him directly, to see his reaction when I finally held the ledger in my hands and let him see that I knew everything. I arranged a casual lunch under the pretense of discussing estate matters. He arrived smiling, oblivious to the storm waiting in the folds of my jacket. I placed the ledger on the table between us. His eyes widened, not with guilt, but with shock that I had found it. "I know what you've been doing," I said quietly. "Every sale, every transfer, every forged signature, it's all here." He laughed nervously, a sharp, uncomfortable sound. "David, come on, it's not what you think." I cut him off. "No, Mark, it's exactly what I think. You've betrayed me, our parents, and the entire family legacy. And now, you're going to face the consequences." The tension at the table was suffocating. I could see his mind racing, searching for an escape, for a lie that might save him. But the ledger didn't lie. Every page was a testament to his greed and arrogance. That was when I made my first strategic move. I told him I wanted to review all remaining documents at my lawyer's office. His hesitation was subtle but unmistakable. He thought he could bluff his way through, but the seed of fear had been planted. Walking out of that lunch, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. The betrayal still stung, but now it fueled a fire of determination. He had underestimated me, assumed I'd be blind, slow, or trusting forever. He was wrong. I began organizing the evidence meticulously, creating a timeline, and preparing for the moment when his schemes would unravel completely. I even reached out to banks and accountants discreetly, ensuring every transaction could be traced and verified. By the end of the week, I had a full dossier. I knew exactly how much he had taken, where it was, and which lies he had told to cover his tracks. More importantly, I knew exactly how to hit him where it hurt most, not just legally, but emotionally. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you know the feeling of holding the evidence, of knowing the truth while the other person still believes they are untouchable. That power is intoxicating, and it's what I clung to as I prepared for the reckoning. The next part will show how I turned the tables completely, how Mark Parker's arrogance became his undoing, and how the first moves of revenge began to take shape. The ledger wasn't just proof, it was my weapon, and the game was about to change. I didn't sleep much the week after confronting Mark. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ledger, his handwriting, the dates, the signatures he forged, almost mocking me. But that lack of sleep didn't weaken me. It sharpened me. It gave me clarity, purpose, and a quiet sense of resolve I hadn't felt since our parents passed. The first step of my plan wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was strategic. I met with my lawyer, Rachel, a woman who had seen every kind of family betrayal imaginable. When she flipped through the evidence I'd gathered, she paused several times, jaw tightening. "David, this is worse than you described. He didn't just siphon off assets. He positioned everything to make it look like you agreed." Hearing that made my stomach twist. "He thinks he can get away with it," I said. "He thinks I'll just accept whatever he's done." Rachel leaned back. "Let's give him enough rope to hang himself." That was when the real planning began. We started by freezing what little remained under my name. Then we triggered quiet inquiries to every institution Mark had dealt with. Rachel wanted his entire network to feel the pressure without realizing where it was coming from. Banks were asked for verification documents. Realtors were served notice to provide transactional records. Even the notary who notarized the forged signatures received an inquiry. All of this happened silently. Mark had no idea. But I wanted to do more than corner him legally. I wanted him to feel the ground shaking. I wanted him to sense something was wrong but not know where the blow was coming from. So I played the role of the trusting brother a little longer. I called him 2 days later. "Hey, Mark, thinking maybe we should talk through everything again. Maybe I overreacted." He took the bait instantly. His voice softened with that familiar fake warmth. "David, of course, I knew you'd come around. Let's meet this weekend and walk through it calmly." Every word he said made my skin crawl, but I matched his tone. "Yeah, let's do that. I want to understand your plan." He sounded relieved, too relieved, and that confirmed something. He wasn't confident. He was terrified. The meeting was set for Saturday at the house we grew up in, the house he'd quietly tried to list without telling me. My lawyer advised against confronting him alone, so I didn't. I brought an accountant friend, posing as a financial advisor, who would ask the right questions and push Mark into revealing things he never intended to say out loud. When we arrived, Mark was already there, pacing the living room. The same living room where we once built forts out of blankets and laughed at TV shows with our parents. Now it felt like enemy territory. "David," he said, opening his arms like some kind of savior. "Glad you're thinking rationally." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just want clarity. This is Tom. He's been helping me understand the estate numbers." Mark's face twitched. Just once. Just enough to reveal discomfort. Then he smoothed it over with a smile. We sat at the dining table. I watched him closely. He kept touching his collar, tapping the table, avoiding eye contact. He was scared. He just didn't know how much he should be scared. Tom started casually. "So, Mark, walk me through the asset transfers. Some of these numbers don't make sense. Can you explain the purpose of moving funds into the holding account ending in 7162? Mark blinked. "That was, part of a restructuring plan." "What kind of restructuring?" Tom asked. "Well, you know, consolidating funds for investment opportunities." Tom nodded and flipped through fake documents we had prepared. "And the sale of the lakeside property? What was the reason for listing it under a different LLC? Mark swallowed hard. "That was just a temporary measure." I could see sweat forming at his temples. He was unraveling. Then I slid the ledger across the table. "Mark, why don't you tell us what all of this is?" He stared at it, his face drained of color. "David, we already talked about that. You misunderstood." "No." My voice was quiet, steady. "I didn't misunderstand, and I gave you the chance to come clean. You didn't." The tension in the room was suffocating. Tom pushed a little further. "Mark, you do realize these transactions match multiple indicators of fraud, right? They involve forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, and sales that violate estate law." "I didn't forge anything," he snapped, panic finally breaking through. I leaned forward. "Mark, we already confirmed with the notary. She said she never met me. She signed off based on a copy you gave her." His eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. "And the realtor provided emails. The bank gave dates. Every lie you built is collapsing." He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "David, listen. You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said softly. "You blew it the moment you decided your greed mattered more than our parents, more than our family." He stared at me, chest heaving, eyes darting around as if looking for an escape that didn't exist. I delivered the next line with calm precision. "Everything is already in motion, Mark. Every institution you dealt with has been notified, and there's nothing you can hide anymore." He sank back into his chair slowly, defeated. What do you want from me?" For the first time in months, I felt the power shift. The betrayal still ached, but it no longer controlled me. "I want the truth," I said. "Every account, every asset, every lie. You're going to hand it over, and if you don't..." I paused. "You're going to face criminal charges." He buried his face in his hands. That was the moment I knew. The revenge had begun. But this was only the first wave. The real storm was still coming. Mark didn't say a word for a long time. He just sat there, hunched over the table where our family once shared holiday meals, his hands covering his face like a child bracing for punishment. And in a way, that's exactly what this was. Not revenge for the sake of cruelty, but accountability for a man who thought he could rewrite our family's legacy and walk away untouched. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, not from remorse, from fear. "David, I can fix this," he said quietly, like a salesman trying to salvage a deal that had already died. "No," I replied. "You can start by telling the truth. That's it." He hesitated, glancing at Tom, then at the ledger like it was a bomb waiting to go off. "Fine," he muttered, "but I didn't mean for it to get this far." I didn't respond. Letting him talk was part of the plan. And he did talk. Slowly at first, then like a dam breaking. He admitted to selling the first property because he needed liquidity. Then he said he'd intended to replace the funds. Then he admitted he never actually tried. He talked about debts, pressure, opportunities he didn't want to miss, excuses stacked on excuses, all wrapped in a flimsy shell of justification. But the truth was clear. He didn't sell those assets out of desperation. He sold them because he thought he could get away with it. When he finally stopped talking, Tom spoke up. "Mark, the amount missing exceeds $700,000. That's felony-level fraud, forgery, identity misuse. Do you realize the scale of what you've done?" Mark didn't answer. His jaw clenched. His foot bounced anxiously against the floor. The man who used to dominate every conversation suddenly looked small, trapped, and painfully aware of the hole he'd dug. I slid a stack of documents toward him, prepared with Rachel's guidance. "Here's your only way out," I said. "A confession, a full transfer of all remaining assets back to the estate, and a legally binding declaration that you acted alone." He read the top page. His hands trembled. "You want me to sign this?" he whispered. "Yes," I said calmly, "or the next conversation we have will be in court." The silence that followed felt heavy, like even the walls were listening. Finally, he took the pen. He signed, but this wasn't the end. I knew signing under pressure wasn't enough. He could try to backpedal, claim coercion, pretend he didn't understand. So the next phase needed to begin immediately. Recovery. I spent the following week working with Rachel and Tom, making calls, submitting filings, and initiating asset holds. Each step was delicate. Each document mattered. The goal wasn't just reclaiming what he took. It was sealing every possible escape route he might try to use later. By Thursday, the first property sale he had initiated was reversed. The bank froze his personal account. A brokerage firm flagged suspicious activity linked to him, and the offshore account he thought no one could ever trace. It was now under federal review because some of the transfers violated reporting thresholds. I didn't tell him any of this. Not yet. Silence was part of the strategy. Instead, I let him wonder. And he did. He called me 7 times in 2 days. I ignored every call. He texted, apologizing, begging, insisting he could find a way to return the money. He pleaded for a meeting. He even tried guilt. "Mom wouldn't want this," he wrote at one point. That was the one message that made my hands shake with rage. Mom wouldn't have wanted this. Mom wouldn't have wanted a son who forged her signature after she died. Mom wouldn't have wanted parts of her life sold off like yard sale leftovers. Mom wouldn't have wanted lies, betrayal, and calculated theft. And she definitely wouldn't have wanted me to roll over and forgive it. On Friday afternoon, Rachel and I arranged a 3-way meeting with a probate judge, something quietly scheduled through back channels. We presented the evidence, the confession, the timeline, and the ongoing recovery process. The judge barely needed 15 minutes. He signed an emergency order placing the entire estate, everything, under my sole management. When the document slid across the table toward me, something inside me shifted. For months I'd felt powerless, blindsided, betrayed. But now I was in control. The judge glanced at the evidence again and then said, "Your brother is fortunate we're handling this civilly for now. With this level of fraud, the district attorney could file criminal charges immediately." Rachel didn't miss a beat. "We understand, and we're still evaluating our options." I didn't say a word. I just nodded. That night, after everything was finalized, I finally answered Mark's calls. The panic in his voice hit me the moment he spoke. "David, thank God, I was scared. I thought you were going to—" "It's done," I said, cutting him off. "What do you mean, done?" "I mean the estate is no longer in your hands. I'm now the sole executor. Every asset has been frozen or recovered. Your accounts are under review, and your confession is legally binding." I could hear him breathing hard, like he'd been punched. David, you can't do that. You can't just take everything." "You stole everything," I said softly. "I'm just taking it back." He didn't respond, so I continued. "You're not going to prison, Mark. Not today, but only because I'm giving you one chance to walk away without destroying the rest of your life. You stay out of the estate. You stay out of my affairs. You don't touch a cent that belongs to our parents. If you violate any part of that, I'll hand the entire dossier to the district attorney." I let the words sink in. "I mean it," I said. "One step out of line and you lose everything." For a moment all I heard was silence. Then, finally, a broken whisper. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer, because some apologies arrive years too late. I hung up the phone, and for the first time since discovering that ledger, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not relief, but a sense of justice slowly settling into place. This was the turning point. The final act was still ahead, and it would decide whether Mark learned his lesson or whether I had to take things even further. Mark didn't speak for several long minutes, just sat there, slouched in the same chair where our parents once hosted countless family dinners. The house that had held so many memories now felt like a courtroom, and in a way, it was. Finally, he lifted his head, eyes red and wary. "David, I can fix this," he muttered, voice shaky, like a man trying to salvage a deal already dead. "No," I said calmly. "You can start by telling the truth." He hesitated, glancing at the ledger as if it had suddenly become a dangerous object. "Fine," he said, almost defeated. "I sold the properties, moved the money. I thought I could manage it before you noticed." I let the words hang in the air, heavy with months of betrayal. "You thought you could steal from me, from our parents' legacy, and get away with it?" He swallowed hard, fumbling for an explanation. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought I could do it carefully." "Carefully," I echoed. "You forged signatures, emptied accounts, and lied to everyone who trusted you. That's not careful. That's theft." Mark's hands trembled as he reached for the ledger, almost like he was trying to reclaim control. But I slid it across the table, keeping my eyes locked on him. "Everything is here. Every transaction, every falsified document. And now, there's nowhere left to hide." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I didn't think you'd ever find out." "I did," I said quietly. "And now the choice is simple. You either hand over everything remaining in your control, accounts, deeds, documents, or I escalate this legally. You've already admitted to enough that criminal charges are possible." His jaw clenched. Panic flashed across his face. He looked around the room as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. For the first time in months, Mark looked small, vulnerable, exposed. I can sign it back. I'll reverse everything that's left," he stammered, reaching for the pen I had placed on the table. "I'll cooperate." I nodded slowly. "Good. You'll also provide a full account of all transactions and all hidden assets. Everything you've done will be documented, signed, and witnessed." He took the pen with shaking hands. One by one, he signed the pages, each stroke a quiet confession. The arrogance that had dominated every interaction evaporated. The brother who once seemed untouchable had been stripped down to accountability. Once the documents were complete, I contacted our lawyer and accountant to implement immediate freezes and reversals. Property sales were canceled, accounts flagged, and any trace of his hidden funds was being traced and recovered. I didn't tell Mark what we had done step by step. Silence was part of the plan. The uncertainty would keep him contained until the legal system sealed the deal. For 2 days, he called and texted constantly, pleading, bargaining, even trying to guilt me with memories of childhood. I ignored everything. I let him stew in the fear he had caused himself. Each missed call, each unanswered message was a reminder that power had shifted. By the end of the week, every property he had attempted to liquidate was restored to the estate. Bank accounts were frozen, and any remaining transfers were reversed. The ledger, my weapon, had become the key to reclaiming everything. And Mark was powerless to stop it. Finally, I agreed to meet him one last time, not for confrontation, but to ensure compliance. When he arrived, he looked defeated, eyes hollow. He didn't try to speak first. I didn't either. "You understand the terms," I said simply. "Everything stays under my control. No interference, no attempts to claim assets later. One mistake and the authorities will be involved." He nodded, barely audible. "I understand." And that was it. No apology could undo the months of betrayal. No words could reverse the theft or the fear he had caused. But the lesson was clear. I had reclaimed what was mine, legally and decisively. Walking away from that meeting, I felt a weight lift. Not happiness, not celebration, but a quiet satisfaction. Justice had been restored. The family legacy, the estate our parents entrusted to us, was safe. Mark's arrogance had been dismantled, and for once, I had the control I needed to protect what mattered. Sitting in my office later that night, looking over the recovered accounts and documents, I realized something fundamental. Surviving betrayal isn't about vengeance alone. It's about standing firm, planning wisely, and executing with patience. It's about reclaiming your life without letting anger consume it. Mark would have to live with the consequences of his actions every day, and I would live with the peace of knowing I had taken every possible measure to protect what was ours, guided by truth, patience, and resolve. The ledger that once revealed his lies had become my instrument of justice. And in that moment, I finally understood the power of patience, strategy, and unwavering resolve. I had lost trust, but I had not lost myself. And that, in the end, was the victory that truly mattered.